The village of Ronga and Nyah's struggles. The village of Ronga lay nestled between rolling hills and vast waters, where the great moonstream river flowed, its silver surface glimmering beneath the eternal watch of the moon. It was said that the river held ancient spirits, beings older than time, whispering secrets to those who dared to listen. Among the villagers lived Nyah, a young woman known for her delicate beauty and kind heart. Her eyes, dark as the depth of the moonstream, reflected both innocence and sorrow. Her long, braided hair framed her face, and her slender hands bore the signs of hard labor, calloused, yet graceful. Though admired by many, her life was far from easy. Nyah's father, Boko, was once the village's most skilled fisherman. He had a way of reading the river, understanding its tides, and finding the best spots where fish thrived. His laughter once echoed through the village, filling their small hut with warmth. But now, he lay weak and motionless on a straw mat, his breath shallow, his skin burning with fever. For weeks, Molly, Nyah's mother, had tried every traditional remedy she knew. She boiled bitter herbs, mixed healing roots, and whispered ancient prayers into the wind. But nothing worked. The village healer had come once, examined Boko with knowing eyes, and sighed deeply. "This sickness is beyond my power," he had said. "The gods have turned their backs. Only medicine from the great traders beyond the hills might save him." Medicine. That meant money, something they did not have. A daughter's desperation. Nyah spent her days caring for her father, wiping his face with cool water, feeding him broth when he was strong enough to sip, and watching as the man who once carried her on his shoulders now struggled to lift even a finger. One evening, after another long day of worry and exhaustion, she walked to the moonstream to fetch water. The sky burned in shades of orange and deep purple, the reflection shimmering on the river's surface. She set down her clay pot and sank to the ground, her heart heavy. As she gazed at her reflection in the water, tears welled in her eyes. She had never felt so powerless. With a trembling voice, she began to sing a soft, sorrowful tune her mother used to hum when times were hard. The melody floated across the water, blending with the rustling leaves and the distant cries of nightbirds. She sang of pain, of longing, of a daughter's love for her father. She did not know how long she sat there, but as darkness deepened, exhaustion overtook her, and she drifted into an uneasy sleep beneath the old baobab tree by the water's edge. The serpent's arrival. A rustling in the reeds startled her awake. Nyah's eyes flew open, and she felt something cold and smooth brush against her arm. A shiver crawled down her spine as she turned her head and gasped. A massive emerald-green snake slithered across the ground beside her, its scales shimmering in the moonlight. Its body coiled and uncoiled with fluid grace, and its piercing golden eyes locked onto hers. She tried to scramble away, but her body felt frozen. The snake raised its head, tilting it slightly, as if studying her. Then, in a voice as smooth as the river's flow, it spoke. "Why do you weep, child of the earth?" Nyah's breath caught in her throat. A speaking snake. Was she dreaming? She shook her head, gripping the damp earth beneath her. You can talk," she whispered. "I am Zalaira," the serpent said, its voice almost melodic. "And I have heard your sorrow." Nyah's heart pounded in her chest. Legends of the moonstream spirits rushed through her mind, stories of beings who dwelled in the waters, offering blessings or curses to those who crossed their path. "Please," she said, barely above a whisper. "I mean no harm. I only came for water." "I know," Zalaira replied. "But your tears called to me. You sang a song of pain. Tell me, child, what burdens your soul?" Nyah hesitated. She should run. She should not trust a creature like this. But the weight of her father's suffering was unbearable. And something about the snake's voice, deep, calm, knowing, made her speak. "My father is sick," she said, her voice trembling. The healer says only medicine from beyond the hills can save him. But we are poor. I don't know what to do. The snake was silent for a long moment, its golden eyes never leaving hers. Then, it slithered closer, coiling around itself in a hypnotic motion. I can help you, Zalaira said finally. I can give you wealth beyond measure. Nyah's breath caught. Wealth. The serpent nodded. Gold. Silver. As much as you need. But, its voice softened. All gifts come with a price. The hidden price. A chill ran through Nyah's body. A price. Of course, there was always a price. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Zalaira's gaze bore into hers, unreadable, endless. Only your company. Nyah frowned. My company. Each night, you must come here and sing for me, Zalaira said. Let me listen to the sorrow and beauty of your voice. In return, I shall bless you with wealth. Nyah felt her heart race. Could it be so simple? Singing. She looked down at her trembling hands, imagining them filled with coins, enough to save her father, to feed her family, to change their fate. But something deep inside her stirred, a warning, a whisper of caution. Still, desperation overpowered fear. She lifted her chin. And that is all? You only want me to sing? A slow hiss escaped the serpent's mouth, almost like laughter. For now. The words slithered into her ears, but she pushed away the unease creeping into her chest. Nyah took a deep breath, sealed her fate, and nodded. I accept. The serpent's promise. Nyah's hands trembled as she held the golden god Zalaira had gifted her. It was smooth and warm to the touch, no larger than a coconut, but it felt heavy, as if it carried the weight of something unseen. She had expected it to be empty, but when she opened it, her breath caught in her throat. Inside, gold coins gleamed under the moonlight. Not just a handful, but enough to buy food, clothes, medicine, everything her family needed. Her heart pounded. Could this really be happening? Zalaira, still coiled by the water's edge, watched her with his golden eyes. This is just the beginning, he said smoothly. Come back tomorrow, and you shall have more. Nyah hesitated. Something about his voice sent a shiver through her, but the weight of the god in her hands reminded her why she was here. Her father needed her. Swallowing her unease, she bowed slightly. Thank you, Zalaira, she whispered. Then, without another word, she turned and hurried home. A sudden change in fortune. The walk back to her family's hut felt surreal. Every step she took, she glanced at the god, half expecting the gold to disappear like a cruel trick. But when she reached home, it was still there, real, solid, and shining in the dim firelight. Her mother, Molly, was kneeling beside her father, gently dabbing his forehead with a wet cloth. His breathing was shallow, and his once strong frame now seemed frail and shrunken. Nyah's heart twisted at the sight. Mother, she said softly. Molly looked up, her weary face lined with worry. Nyah. You were gone so long. Where have you been? Nyah hesitated for only a second before forcing a smile. I found work, she said, kneeling beside her. With the village elders. They needed help, and they pay well. Molly's eyes widened. The elders. Nyah nodded quickly. Yes. They gave me an advance. She reached into the gourd and pulled out several gold coins, placing them in her mother's hands. Molly gasped. Nyah, this is too much. Now we can buy father's medicine, Nyah said, forcing cheerfulness into her voice. And food. And whatever else we need. Tears filled Molly's eyes as she clutched the coins to her chest. Oh, my child, you have saved us. Nyah tried to smile, but her chest felt tight. The lie had come too easily. The price of wealth. The next morning, Molly wasted no time. She took the money and traveled to the market, buying medicine from the traders beyond the hills. By the afternoon, Boko had been given the first dose, and though his recovery would take time, his breathing had already begun to steady. Hope returned to their home. And so, each night, Nyah returned to the stream. She sat beneath the old baobab tree, lifted her voice to the wind, and sang for Zalaira. Sometimes, she sang the same sorrowful lullaby she had sung the first night. Other times, she sang about her dreams, her fears, and her gratitude. And each night, the golden god filled itself with wealth. Their lives changed. They ate full meals, their hut was repaired, and Molly could finally rest instead of working herself to exhaustion. But Nyah did not feel at peace. The more she visited Zalaira, the more uneasy she became. He never spoke of their bargain, never asked for anything beyond her songs. But each night, as he watched her, his gaze felt heavier, more intense. She convinced herself it was just her imagination. Until the night he spoke the words that made her blood run cold. The demand. The air was thick with the scent of rain, the leaves rustling in the distance. Nyah had just finished her song, letting the last note drift over the water. Zalaira, coiled as always at the river's edge, had been silent for a long time. Then, he moved closer. Closer than ever before. "You have done well," he murmured, his golden eyes locked onto hers. "You have kept your promise." Nyah forced a small smile. "And you have kept yours." A long silence stretched between them. Then, Zalaira spoke again. "Now, it is time." Nyah felt a chill creep up her spine. Time for what, she asked, though deep down, she already knew. The serpent's coils shifted, his emerald scales gleaming under the moonlight. "For you to share my embrace." Nyah's breath caught. Her stomach clenched. She took a step back. I don't understand." Zalaira tilted his head slightly, as if amused. "Our bargain was never just about your voice, little one. You agreed to my companionship." Nyah's mouth went dry. "You never said. Did you not wonder why I asked for nothing more than a song? Did you not think that true wealth comes at a price?" Nyah's heart pounded. Her throat tightened. She hadn't thought. She had been too desperate. Too afraid. And now, it was too late. Zalaira's gaze hardened. "Step into the water, Nyah." Her body locked in place. No. She wanted to scream, to run, but then she thought of her father, still weak in their hut. What if she refused? What if Zalaira took back his gift? What if her father's illness returned? She knew, in her heart, that he could do it. She couldn't risk it. Tears burned at the edges of her vision as she swallowed back her fear. Slowly, hesitantly, she took a single step forward. Then another. Her bare feet touched the water, the cold seeping into her skin. Zalaira's coils unwound, and for the first time, he moved into the river, his body half submerged. The air was thick with silence. Nyah's hands trembled as she took the final step, wading deeper into the sacred waters. Zalaira's golden eyes never left her. And as the water rose around her, she knew. Her nightmare was only just beginning. A secret burden. Nyah walked home that night with shaking hands and a hollow heart. The river's cold touch still clung to her skin, and no matter how much she rubbed her arms, she couldn't shake the feeling of Zalaira's presence. His scaled body, his golden eyes, the way he had coiled around her in the water, it made her stomach churn. She had done what he asked. She had kept her promise. But at what cost? Her mother's face lit up when she returned, the weight of worry lessening with every passing day. Her father, Boko, had started to sit up again, his voice regaining its strength. And yet, Nyah felt no joy. She should have been happy. She should have felt relief. But all she felt was empty. Each night, she returned to the stream. Each night, she sang for Zalaira. And each night, he demanded more of her. A change in Nyah. It didn't take long for the village to notice. Nyah, once full of life, now barely spoke. She no longer laughed with the other girls or danced under the moonlight during village celebrations. She avoided everyone, even her own mother. And yet, her family was richer than ever. Her hut, once small and broken, was now one of the finest in Ronga. They always had fresh meat, the finest woven fabrics, and more food than they could eat. The villagers whispered, "Where is all this money coming from? She says she works for the elders, but no one has seen her there. Something is not right." The whispers followed Nyah wherever she went, and though she pretended not to hear, she could feel their eyes on her. But no one was more suspicious than Tono. Tono's growing suspicion. Tono was Nyah's childhood friend, a hunter known for his sharp instincts and fierce loyalty. He had always admired Nyah's kindness, and in his heart, he had always hoped they might one day share a future together. But the Nyah he knew was fading away, replaced by someone distant and secretive. Tono saw the way she avoided him, how she refused to meet his eyes. And he knew something was wrong. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Tono sat outside his hut, sharpening his spear. He watched as Nyah slipped away, heading towards the moonstream with a clay pot balanced on her hip. But she wasn't just fetching water. She always left at night. She always returned looking drained. And Tono was done waiting for answers. He followed her. The truth revealed. Keeping to the shadows, Tono moved silently, his hunter's instincts keeping his footsteps light. He kept his distance, watching from behind the trees as Nyah approached the riverbank. She set down her pot, then, as she had done so many nights before, she began to sing. Her voice was soft, sorrowful, filled with a pain that Tono had never heard before. And then, he saw it. A massive, emerald-green serpent slithered from the water, its golden eyes fixed on her. Tono's heart pounded in his chest. The snake was speaking. Tono strained to hear, but the blood was roaring in his ears. His fingers tightened around his spear. Nyah was not alone at the river. And this was no ordinary snake. Then, to his horror, the serpent coiled around her, just as she stopped singing. Tono couldn't take it anymore. He stepped out from the shadows. Nyah! Nyah gasped and spun around, her eyes wide with terror. Tono stormed forward, his grip white-knuckled on his spear. "What are you doing?" Zalaira hissed, his golden eyes narrowing. Nyah's heart pounded. "Tono! You shouldn't be here." Tono ignored her, his gaze locked on the serpent. "What is this? Who is this?" His voice was furious, afraid. Zalaira tilted his head, his voice smooth as silk. "Leave, hunter. This does not concern you." Tono's jaw tightened. "She is my concern." Nyah felt dizzy. The walls she had built to keep her secret hidden were crumbling around her. Tono turned to her, his voice quieter now, filled with betrayal. "Nyah, what have you done?" She couldn't hold it in anymore. Tears spilled from her eyes as she fell to her knees. I didn't have a choice," she whispered. And then, the truth came pouring out. She told him everything, about her father's illness, about her desperation, about how Zalaira had offered her wealth in exchange for her songs. And finally, she told him what Zalaira had truly wanted. Tono's face darkened, his hands clenching into fists. "You," his voice shook with rage. He turned to Zalaira, his spear raised. "You monster." Zalaira simply laughed. She came to me, Hunter. She made a choice. Tono's chest heaved with fury. You tricked her. The serpent tilted his head. Did I? Tono gritted his teeth. He turned to Nyah, his voice filled with urgency. You must stop this, Nyah. You must break free from him. Nyah shook her head violently. I can't. My family, if I stop, the wealth disappears. And my father? Tono grabbed her shoulders. Your father is alive, Nyah. You do not need this anymore. But Nyah's heart ached. She wanted to believe him. Yet, Zalaira's words whispered in her mind. True wealth comes at a price. What if her father fell ill again? What if they lost everything? She looked at Tono with tear-filled eyes. I don't know how to stop. Tono's grip tightened. You have to try. A choice to make. That night, Nyah did not sleep. She lay awake in her hut, staring at the ceiling, Zalaira's voice echoing in her mind. She had been trapped for too long. She had thought she was doing what was right. But was it worth it? Tono's words stayed with her. You must stop this. But could she? Nyah turned on her side, staring at the golden god by her bedside. The very thing that had saved her father. And yet, the very thing that was destroying her. The choice lay before her. Would she continue to pay the price of Zalaira's bargain? Or would she finally find a way to break free? She did not know. But soon, she would have to decide. The serpent's true nature. Nyah stared at her reflection in the small bronze mirror her mother had gifted her years ago. She barely recognized herself. Her once radiant skin had lost its glow, turning pale and lifeless. The soft roundness of her face was replaced by sharp, gaunt features. Her lips, once full and warm, now looked chapped and dry. And then there were the scales. At first, she had thought it was just her imagination, tiny, rough patches on her forearms that she convinced herself were nothing more than dry skin. But now, under the dim glow of the oil lamp, she could see them clearly. Small, emerald green scales, shimmering just beneath the surface. Nyah's breath caught in her throat. She rubbed at them desperately, but they wouldn't come off. And her eyes. She had noticed it the night before, when she had caught her reflection in the river surface, a flicker, a strange glow in the depths of her pupils. Her once dark brown eyes now glowed golden in the moonlight. A chill crawled down her spine. This was not normal. Something was happening to her. And she knew exactly where it had begun. She grabbed her shawl, wrapped it tightly around her arms to hide the scales, and slipped quietly out of the hut. It was time to face Zalaira. A deal that cannot be broken. The night air was thick and humid as Nyah reached the moonstream. The water was calm, reflecting the moon's pale light. And there, as always, he was waiting. Zalaira lay stretched across the riverbank, his emerald scales gleaming in the moonlight, his golden eyes watching her with a knowing gaze. You have come, he murmured, his voice smooth as silk. Nyah clenched her fist. You tricked me. Zalaira's tongue flicked out, almost amused. Did I? She yanked up her sleeves, revealing the scales forming on her arms. What is this? What is happening to me? The serpent chuckled, his long body shifting in the grass. Oh, it has begun. A cold weight settled in Nyah's stomach. What do you mean? Zalaira's golden eyes gleamed. You are becoming mine. Nyah's breath caught in her throat. No, that wasn't part of the deal. You said I only had to share my embrace, Zalaira finished for her. And now, my essence is in you. We are bound, Nyah. You belong to the river now. A wave of horror washed over her. No, she whispered, shaking her head. I don't belong to you. I won't. Zalaira's laughter slithered through the night air. You already do. Nyah took a shaky step back. I want out. I want this to end. The snake smiled. And then, in a voice cold and final, he said, there is no way out. Nyah's heart pounded. Zalaira slithered closer, his coils gliding through the grass like silk. You made your choice, little one. You wanted wealth. You wanted power. And now, the river has claimed you. Nyah turned and ran. The pool of the water. By the time she reached home, her entire body ached. She threw herself onto her sleeping mat, clutching her arms, feeling the scales spread. Her breath came in ragged gasps. She had to fight it. But the pool was growing stronger. Every night, her dreams were filled with the sound of water, of whispers calling her name, of the river's voice luring her back. And the worst part. She wanted to go. She woke each morning drenched in sweat, her throat aching with thirst. But no matter how much water she drank, it never satisfied her. She needed the river. She needed Zalaira. But she could not go back. Not now. Not ever. The confession. Nyah had kept her secret for too long. That morning, as the village stirred awake, she made her way to her mother, her hands shaking. Molly was outside, grinding millet, her expression peaceful for the first time in weeks. But as soon as she saw Nyah's face, the smile vanished. Nyah, she said, concern etching her features. What's wrong? Nyah swallowed hard. Tears welled in her eyes. Mother, she whispered, I've done something terrible. And then, the truth poured out. She told her mother everything about Zalaira, the golden god, the bargain she had made, and the horrifying price she was now paying. Molly's face grew pale. She dropped the wooden bowl she was holding, her hands trembling. My child, her voice broke. Oh, my child, what have you done? Nyah sobbed, gripping her mother's arms. I didn't know. I didn't know the cost. Molly's breath shuddered. Then, without a word, she grabbed Nyah's wrist and pulled her along. Where are we going? Nyah asked, her voice shaking. To the elders, Molly said, her voice like steel. The elders' verdict. The village elders were respected and feared, men and women who carried the knowledge of centuries, who spoke with the spirits, who understood the unseen. They sat beneath the sacred acacia tree, their old eyes watching as Molly pleaded for her daughter's soul. When Nyah revealed her scales, the elders muttered among themselves, their faces grim. At last, the oldest among them, Elder Com, spoke. Zalaira, he murmured, stroking his long beard. It is as I feared. Molly clutched her chest. You know this spirit? The elder nodded. He is no ordinary snake. He is a spirit of greed, an ancient one, cursed to forever seek those who desire wealth beyond their means. He lures them with promises of gold and prosperity, but the price is always the same. Nyah's throat tightened. What price? The elder's dark eyes met hers. Their humanity. A shiver crawled up Nyah's spine. If you do not break the bond, child, you will no longer be one of us, Com continued. You will become like him, a creature of the river, cursed to remain in its depths forever. Nyah's blood turned to ice. Molly clutched her daughter. Tell us how to break it. Please. The elders were silent for a long moment. Then, Com spoke again. Only true sacrifice can break the curse. Nyah's stomach twisted. What kind of sacrifice? Elder Com's voice was low, grave. The life of the one who gave you the gift. Nyah's heart stopped. He meant Zalaira. She would have to kill him. The thought sent a wave of terror through her. How could she possibly destroy a spirit older than time itself? But there was no other way. If she did not, she would lose everything. And worst of all, she could feel it happening already. The river was calling her. And soon, she would not be able to resist. The desperate escape. The moment Nyah left the village, she felt the river calling her back. The weight of the curse clung to her skin, an invisible chain that tugged at her soul. Every night, she heard Zalaira's voice whispering in her mind. Every pool of water reflected not her own face, but his golden eyes. Yet, she could not stay. She could not let him claim her. And so, she ran. Tono, ever loyal, ever fierce, ran with her. Together, they fled across the hills, through the tall grasses and dense forest, hoping to leave the moonstream's curse behind. But no matter how far they traveled, Zalaira was never far away. The curse follows. At first, it was just dreams. Nyah would wake in the middle of the night, gasping for air, feeling phantom coils wrapping around her. She would wake soaked in sweat, her body aching with the need to return to the water. Then, the whispers began. During the day, when she passed puddles from the last rain, she would hear him. "You cannot run from me, little one." At night, when they camped near a lake, she swore she saw ripples forming in still water, though no wind stirred the surface. Tono watched her with growing concern. "Nyah, you're not eating," he said one evening as they sat by a dying fire. "You barely sleep." "You look," he hesitated. Nyah knew what he wanted to say. She looked less human every day. Her arms had more scales now, spreading up to her shoulders. Her nails had darkened, thick and claw-like. And her eyes, under the light of the fire, held a golden glow that was not her own. She tried to speak, but her throat felt dry. No matter how much she drank, nothing satisfied her thirst. Because it wasn't water she needed. It was the river. A horrifying sight. A week into their escape, Nyah made a terrible mistake. They had stopped to drink by a clear, rushing stream in the mountains. Tono cupped water in his hands, offering it to her. But she hesitated. The water seemed different. As she leaned forward to drink, she caught her reflection in the stream. And screamed. She wasn't human anymore. Her skin had turned a pale, greenish hue, her eyes fully golden, her hair thinning into long, black strands that moved like water. "No, no, no, no." She stumbled back, her hands grasping at her face, trying to erase what she saw. Then, the water rippled. From the depths, Zalaira emerged. Zalaira's wrath. The serpent rose from the water, his body massive, his golden eyes burning with fury. "You cannot run from me, Nyah." Tono grabbed his spear, stepping between them. "Stay back." But Zalaira did not even look at him. His gaze was fixed only on her. "You belong to me. Did you think you could escape your fate?" Nyah shook her head violently. "I won't go back. I won't." Zalaira's coils tightened, his body rising higher. "Then let me remind you of the price you pay for defying me." The air grew heavy. The ground shook. And then, Nyah clutched her chest, gasping. Pain. Unbearable pain. It felt as though her heart was being squeezed, crushed by unseen hands. She fell to her knees, struggling to breathe. Zalaira's voice was like thunder in her skull. "Your father's life is tied to mine. The moment you break our bond, he will die." Tono's face drained of color. Nyah froze. Her father. Her sweet, kind father, the reason she had done all of this. If she did not return to Zalaira, her father would be dead by sunrise. A sob choked her throat. "Please, no." Zalaira smiled, his long tongue flicking out. "Come home, my bride." Tono's gamble. Nyah nearly surrendered right then. Her body craved the water. Her father's life depended on her obedience. She was out of options. But then, Tono stepped forward. His spear gleamed in the dim moonlight, his jaw set in determination. And then, he did the unthinkable. He dropped his weapon. Nyah's breath hitched. Tono, what are you doing? He turned to her, his eyes burning with something fierce. You are not his to claim. He turned back to Zolaira, his voice steady and fearless. I challenge you. Nyah's heart stopped. Zolaira hissed. What? Tono stepped forward. I challenge you, Zolaira, to a battle of wills. Nyah shook her head. No, Tono, you don't understand. He is not just a snake, he is something else. A spirit. You can't. But Tono didn't move. He met Zolaira's gaze with unwavering defiance. I offer my life in exchange for hers. The words hung in the air. Nyah's blood turned cold. Zolaira was silent for a long time. Then, slowly, his lips curled into a grin. Interesting. Nyah clutched at Tono's arm. No, please. But Zolaira was already moving. I accept. Nyah's lungs felt empty. No. Tono, you don't understand. He's stronger than you. He's. Tono turned to her, his hand cupping her face gently. Nyah, he said softly. This has to end. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She had dragged him into this. And now, he was willing to die for her. Zolaira's golden eyes gleamed. The battle would take place at the next full moon. His massive body sank back into the water, his voice like a promise. Prepare yourself, hunter. You will not survive. Then, he was gone. Nyah collapsed to the ground, shaking. Tono knelt beside her, gripping her hands. Nyah. Look at me. She did. Tono's voice was firm, steady, unshakable. We will end this. Together. Nyah swallowed hard, her heart pounding with fear. The full moon was 3 days away. And she knew only one of them would survive the battle to come. The final reckoning. The blood moon hung low over the village, casting an eerie crimson glow over the land. The villagers of Ronga gathered by the moonstream, their whispers hushed, their eyes filled with fear. They had heard the elders decree that tonight, the hunter Tono would face the serpent Zolaira in a battle of life and death. And the river god would not be merciful. The warriors stand. Tono stood at the river's edge, his feet firmly planted in the damp earth. In his hands, he held the sacred spear, a weapon blessed by the village elders, forged in fire and dipped in the ash of sacred trees. It was said that only pure steel, blessed by truth and courage, could wound a spirit. Nyah stood behind him, trembling. Her body still bore the scars of her curse, the emerald scales on her arms, the way her eyes flickered gold under the moon's light. But her heart still belonged to the village. And to Tono. She had brought this curse upon herself. Upon all of them. And tonight, she would do whatever it took to end it. The serpent rises. A deep rumble shook the ground. The villagers gasped as the water began to churn, bubbling as if something massive was rising from the depths. Then, he emerged. Zolaira. The great serpent, larger than any man, his emerald green scales glistening, his golden eyes burning with hunger and fury. His long body coiled around the riverbank, his mouth stretching into something resembling a wicked smile. So, you challenge me, hunter. Zolaira's voice slithered through the air, dark and ancient. Tono gripped his spear tighter. I will end your hold over Nyah. Zolaira's laughter was low, thunderous, filled with mockery. Foolish boy. You will not leave this place alive. And then, he struck. The battle begins. Zolaira lunged, his massive body cutting through the air like a whip. Tono dodged at the last moment, rolling to the side as the serpent's jaws snapped short inches from his head. The villagers screamed, backing away as the ground trembled beneath Zolaira's thrashing coils. Tono moved quickly, spinning on his heels, thrusting the sacred spear toward the serpent's exposed underbelly. But Zolaira was fast, too fast. He twisted, his body slamming into Tono with the force of a crashing wave. The hunter stumbled back, gasping as the air was knocked from his lungs. Nyah's heart pounded. Zolaira was too powerful. Tono couldn't win like this. Not with strength alone. Then, it came to her. A memory. That first night by the moonstream. The song she had sung. The song that had called Zolaira to her. Nyah staggered forward. She lifted her face to the sky and began to sing. The power of song. The moment Nyah's voice filled the air, something changed. The villagers fell silent, their eyes wide with wonder. Even Zolaira hesitated. His body twitched, his head turning sharply toward her. His golden eyes flickered. And for the first time, he looked afraid. Nyah poured her pain, her regret, her sorrow into the melody. She sang of her father's suffering. She sang of her shame. She sang of the price of greed. And as her voice rose, Zolaira's body began to wither. His emerald scales dulled, his golden eyes dimmed. He was losing power. The golden god, the source of his cursed wealth, began to crack. Zolaira snarled. No. He tried to coil around Nyah, to silence her, but his body was weakening. His magic was breaking. Nyah sang louder. Let my soul be free, let the river release me. Let your hold be no more. The golden god shattered into dust. And with a piercing scream, Zolaira collapsed to the ground, his massive body thrashing violently. The final strike. Tono saw his chance. With one final, powerful thrust, he drove the sacred spear into Zolaira's heart. The serpent's scream tore through the night, shaking the very earth beneath them. Then, his body stilled. The golden glow in his eyes faded. And before their eyes, Zolaira turned to stone. The great serpent was no more. The curse is broken. A wave of energy rippled through the air, rushing through Nyah's body. She gasped as she fell to her knees, the scales on her arms melting away. Her skin turned warm again, her nails returned to normal, her golden eyes darkened back to their natural brown. She was human again. The curse was gone. At that very moment, back in their hut, Boko awoke with a deep breath, fully healed. And in the village square, the last of Zolaira's gold turned to dust, carried away by the wind. The weight of the curse had been lifted. Nyah looked up, her breath shaking. Tono stood before her, his chest rising and falling, his spear still lodged in the serpent's stone heart. Their eyes met. And for the first time in what felt like eternity, Nyah felt free. A lesson learned. The villagers cheered, but Nyah's heart remained heavy. She had brought this upon herself. Had she been stronger, wiser, she never would have accepted Zolaira's offer. She would never again seek fortune through unnatural means. She turned to Tono, her voice soft with gratitude. You saved me, she whispered. Tono smiled, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. No. You saved yourself. She knew he was right. Together, they turned their backs on the moonstream, walking away from the place that had once bound her. They would not return. And they knew. The serpent's curse would never haunt them again. The end.